All right, hello everyone, it's silverkyle, and today we're going to be going over my December 2023 book wrap-up, which is essentially all the books that I read in the month of December, how much I enjoyed them, and for that month, my TBR was the biggest I had ever created. 8 books is what I wanted to read, 7 novels, 1 novella, and I ended up reading 6 books, which is the most I have ever read in a single month. I am extremely proud of myself, and I know now that if I really push myself and kind of create a schedule and a routine, I'm able to read quite a bit. So that's what I'm going to try to do for the rest of 2024 and probably for the rest of my life, honestly. Maybe not 6, but at least 3 to 4 books a month as we go on in 2024. We'll talk about that in another video for my TBR of series that I want to read in 2024. But let's dive into what I read in the month of December and just kind of give you some quick reviews as I talk about these books. So the first book that I finished in the month of December was Riley Sager's The Only One Left. This is a good one. I did not enjoy it as much as The House Across the Lake, which was the other novel that I really enjoyed from Sager and kind of made me a fan of his. And this is the only second novel that I've finished from him. This was released in 2023, which is always kind of fun when you're reading a new novel. It is a mystery thriller, a little bit of horror novel where the main character is a caretaker for an elderly lady who's in a wheelchair, doesn't really have movement in half her body, is a mute, so she can't speak, and she's in her 70s. And by the sounds of it, 50 years ago, she was the only survivor in a big massacre in her house that killed all of her family except for her. And it's strongly hinted at that it might have been her that killed everyone. And what happens is that she can type with one hand on a typewriter and wants to kind of explain what happened that night when everybody was murdered. So that's kind of the drive for this book. Lots of nice twists and turns. Some things that I was able to guess, others I wasn't. But with any Sager book, it's a good ride until the very end. And I would say that this is a solid 3 out of 5 stars. Good stuff, just not as good as House Across the Lake, but I'm still very much a fan of Sager's work and will be continuing to read his previous works and anything that he comes out with in the future. I already have his pre-order for, I think he has one coming out in June of this year. The next book that I read was David Baldacci's The Edge. Much happier with this one. So this is a 2023 novel, and he released 2 books last year. Simply Lies, did not like that at all. One of the worst books that I read, unfortunately, in 2023. But The Edge is the reason why I read Baldacci's work. This is a thriller mystery novel, and it's a sequel to The 620 Man, which I did enjoy as well, although I would probably say that I enjoyed The Edge more. And it's just a solid kind of investigator story where the main character from The 620 Man has some like military background, and he ends up going to a small town where there's like a military general, I think, or a military man's daughter that was murdered in this small town, and he's there to try to figure out what happened. So you kind of get the vibe that you're in a small town where everybody knows that there's a stranger there, and he doesn't know who to trust, who's telling him the truth, and there's like the small town lies that are going on, small town cliques, that kind of stuff. And it's just, for me, a really fun read to try to figure out what's going on, where you have somebody that has the military experience that's essentially by himself for the most part and trying to figure things out. 3.5 out of 5 stars. This is why I read Baldacci. Good stuff. My least favorite read of 2023, unfortunately, is The Christmas Guest, the only novella. It's like less than 100 pages. I finished it in one shot. Just not good. Not for me. I think that maybe if you like more darker twist, it's not really twisted, just a darker story, this might be more up your alley. And I don't necessarily need happy endings at all. Just this to me was very dark. I did not feel good at the end of it. And that might be the entire purpose of this as well. But when I read these kinds of books or see these kinds of stories in movies and things, movies generally do them a little bit better, I find, with darker stories. But with the novel, it just made me feel like crap at the end. And that's not how I want to feel necessarily when I'm reading a book. Not to say that I might not read other dark stories down the line, but Christmas Guest was, I just was not happy with that at all. Not at all. On the flip side, I very much enjoyed The Drift by C.J. Tudor. This was the first novel that I read from Tudor, and I've seen some other ones here from, like, I've seen C.J. Tudor's name before. I think I have a pre-order potentially for something that's coming out from this author in this year. But either way, this is a thriller, somewhat of a mystery, dystopian type novel, because it's set in a post-apocalyptic world where there's 3 different point of view stories with 3 different main characters happening on each chapter. So chapter 1, you start with story A. Chapter 4, you go back to it. Chapter 2, you're on story B. Chapter 5, you return to it. So it kind of alternates like that. And you, every time that you're finishing up a chapter, you're like, oh no, I'm leaving this story. But the next chapter is going to be one of the other 2 stories that I was also invested in and wanted to find out what's going on. It's done really well in that sense. The writing is solid. The characters are okay, but it's more so the plot of what's going on within these 3 stories in this post-apocalyptic world that really makes you want to keep reading and finding out what's going to happen in each of these 3 stories. That's definitely the driving force here, is figuring out what's happening with all these 3 stories. And one of my friends saw that I really enjoyed the book, and we've read a few books at the same time, so we have very similar tastes in what we enjoy. So he picked it up a few weeks ago, and he finished it within 4 days as well. So we both finished in about the same amount of time, and he also really enjoyed this. So if you like the idea of 3 different mystery stories happening, so the 3 stories are, there's a bus, like a big school bus essentially that's flipped on its side and they can't get out. There's a stranded cable car that's stopped as it's going up the mountain. And then there's like people in a facility. They're the only ones that are not like locked in, but that's essentially, but there's a lot of dissension that's going on within the facility for the people that are there, and it's really good stuff. So check that out. See, this is technically a very dark story, but I was much happier with the ending here than I was with The Christmas Guest. So it really depends. There's probably a specific genre that The Christmas Guest is that's different from The Drift, but either way. All right, we've got 2 more books that I finished, and we're getting into some really good stuff here. The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is my reread of this since I was a teenager. Very much enjoyed this. I wish we got a little bit more maybe of Aragorn's story and everyone else, because even Merry and Pippin, I found pretty darn interesting. I do really like Sam. I just don't really care. Frodo is much better in the books than he is in the movies, but still, I did find that it did slow down quite a bit when we got to Sam and Frodo. I'm curious to see what it's going to be like when I read The Return of the King. So very good stuff. I mean, it's such an incredible world that is written. Like, this is by far the best well-written novel that I read in 2023. By far. Like, there's nothing that even comes close to the writing that Tolkien has. It's incredible. But in terms of an epic story, an epic book that I cannot praise more, the last book that I read in 2023 was something that I added after I created my December TBR, because I kept hearing things about it, and that is The Will of the Many. This got my top read of 2023. It's also a 2023 novel, so it is the best book that I read that was released last year. This is absolutely incredible. I cannot recommend this book more if you like fantasy and academia type books. If you want like Harry Potter for adults, this is it. It's absolutely incredible. The magic system where you basically get people at the bottom of the pyramid, so the people that are poor and even potentially middle class, would all be giving up a portion of their will to people that are above them in the pyramid. And the more people the more will that you're getting, the stronger that you're going to be, the more alert that you're going to be, the more motivation that you're going to have. And then eventually you get to a point where you can start using some of all this extra will to use magic and to imbue things with magic. And that's how the magic works in this world. Really interesting. And then there's so much more in terms of who the main character is, his background as he joins up with this school. He's incredibly intelligent, and you kind of see him progress throughout this world and form these bonds and friendships that he's not really wanting to necessarily, because he doesn't really trust anybody because it's part of this empire that he's against. But you still see the good in people throughout this entire story. And this is book 1 of 3. I cannot wait for book 2. Like, book 2 has to be my most anticipated novel of 2024. And I hope, I'm not even sure if it's necessarily coming out in 2024, because I haven't seen any pre-orders for it, so I'm kind of nervous. But I am just absolutely in love with this series. This Hierarchy book 1, and I am definitely going to read, this is the first book that I read from James Islington, is how you pronounce it, I believe. But I've heard of the Licanius trilogy before. I'm definitely going to be reading that. I have to now. And anything that James puts out, I'm reading. I cannot gush over this enough. I will be doing an actual review of this at some point in time. So if you want to know a little bit more of that, and if you've read it or heard the audiobook, I will be going to spoilers at the very end of that review. So stay tuned. That is coming very soon. So freaking good. All right, so now there's only 2 books then that I didn't read that I wanted to in the month of December, and that is Lisa Jewell's None of This Is True, which is basically a mystery thriller novel, and then we've also got The Helsinki Affair, which is by Anna Pitoniak, which is like a spy novel. So I definitely want to read these at some point in time. I just don't know when, because I kind of have everything scheduled for most of 2023, and I kind of did leave myself a little bit of room for other or every book that I want to read in 2024. So, and I did leave myself a little bit of room for new novels that haven't necessarily been announced yet. But if I do get some time and I do read kind of everything that's in my schedule, I might try to pop these in at some point in time. But I feel like these might be later on after this year. So we'll see how that goes. And last but not least, but for those of you that are still here at the end, I reviewed basically, or I'm going to create a review for The Will of the Many. I've got one for The Two Towers, I've got one for The Drift, and I've got one for The Christmas Guest. If you're interested in me doing some quick, like 5-minute reviews of The Only One Left and The Edge, please let me know if that's something that I should just skip because it's been a while now. Let me know in the comments below. But for those of you that are still around, I'm throwing it out to you. So yes, for reviews of The Edge and The Only One Left, or let's skip it and just move on to some newer stuff. So that's it. Let me know what you read in the month of December, and we will all talk to you next time. And if you've read The Will of Many, let me know what you think, because that's incredible. Thank you all for watching. You've been bearded in. Beardage.